Happy New Year, everyone. It's a new year, a new start, and a time for New Year's resolutions. It's a season of hoping for a better you, a better future. And what's more in theme with that than Metaphor ReFantazio? Metaphor ReFantazio is a game all about wanting change. I mean, if you lived in a world full of corruption, stratification, and discrimination, you'd want to change that too, right? Adding to that, our protagonist is an Elden, a tribe of people who are considered to be unwanted scum of society and bears a huge brunt of the horrible treatment. It's no wonder he carries a fantasy book that details a world where discrimination doesn't exist, where leaders serve their people fairly, and where one can live freely without the conditions of one's birth shackling them down. This book that the protagonist carries around will be at the center of our discussion for this video. We'll be taking a closer look at one of the major themes of Metaphor ReFantazio, the power and importance of stories. We'll talk about this book and why we think it's key to why Metaphor deserved Game Awards Narrative of the Year.
Metaphor ReFantazio.
Off the bat, why do we think that it deserves Narrative of the Year? Well, because it recognizes the very simple yet beautiful fact that stories are so powerful and important to us, and tries to tell this within its own story. It's like a lovely little matryoshka of metaphors. Some spoilers ahead for ReFantazio. If you're planning to play the game and experience the story yourself, feel free to click off, or check out our spoiler-free content on Metaphor ReFantazio. As we said in the intro, the protagonist carries around this book, and it serves as his North Star. The book details what is perceived to be a utopia in the eyes of the people living in the United Kingdom of Uchronia. We're introduced to Uchronia at a time of strife. The kingdom was left leaderless after the assassination of its king. Grotesque monsters called humans terrorize the land. There's a huge divide between the rich and the poor, and discrimination and distrust pervade the nation's many races. It is because of these various dark clouds looming over the kingdom that the lofty ideas found in the protagonist's book seem so far away. The book talks about coexistence, equality, fair and impartial governance, having the freedom to pursue one's dreams, and it serves as the model for what our protagonist envisions the future to be. But with how Uchronia is currently, what the book describes feels like a mere fool's fantasy. Our closest confidants are all people who have been wronged by this world in one way or another. A noble who lost his family and people from a human attack on his homeland. A disgraced knight who couldn't protect her prince from an assassination attempt. A father who lost his son to a violent riot. An innocent child who is outcast for her mixed blood, to name a few. So, it's no surprise that every time the protagonist introduces the book to someone else, they scoff at how unrealistic it sounds. But at the same time, they breathe a deep sigh thinking, but how wonderful it would be if... And this is where the power of fiction slowly creeps in and plants its seed. This simple what if is the fertile bed where the rest of the story will bloom and come to fruition. It all comes from the lofty, seemingly impossible ideas of a fantastical story. While Metaphor ReFantazio takes place in a fantasy world, narratives also carry great importance in our side of reality. Stories have been with us for as long as language has. Maybe even longer if we consider the 30,000 plus year old cave drawings in Lascaux, France, as early attempts at telling stories. For perspective, the earliest known form of writing, cuneiform, is only around 5,000 years old. Stories are such an integral part of humans as a species. And for the wise guys out there, to be clear, I'm talking about this human, not this human, okay? Storytelling has been around for this long and is found throughout all cultures of the world. People engage in it even at a young age. If you've ever been around a toddler, you would know that they yap a lot for someone who knows so little words. It's so prevalent that some scientists even theorize that it's an important evolutionary adaptation that contributed to how we, as a species, have survived this long. To investigate this concept, quite a few studies have looked at hunter-gatherer populations across different countries and cultures and how storytelling worked in their groups as an analog to how our ancestors may have utilized stories. We're repeatedly told that humans are social creatures and that we've survived for so long because of that fact. Two different studies looked at two different hunter-gatherer groups from two entirely different parts of the world. The Kong people of Southern Africa. Oh my god, did I pronounce that right? For your information, this is how it's spelled. and the Aita from the Philippines and studied their storytelling culture. Both studies found that storytelling facilitates cooperation among members of the tribe. The study on the Aita also found that camps with more skilled storytellers were associated with more cooperative behavior. The Kong people also seemed to use stories to share information on animal behavior, which, as you can imagine, would be very important in hunting. Their myths and folklores also informed their people about appropriate social behavior and moral principles, like cooperation, sex equality, and social egalitarian values. Sounds kinda familiar. Storytelling connects us to others even across time. It connects us to the knowledge and ideas of the previous generation, giving us a historical identity. In a book on Aboriginal oral traditions, Hulan and Eigenbrod says, story is the means by which knowledge is reproduced, preserved, and conveyed from generation to generation. Oral traditions are the foundation of Aboriginal societies, connecting speaker and listener in communal experience and uniting past and present in memory. It can even help us become stronger together. In the essay, The Healing Power of Storytelling, Finding Identity Through Narrative, author Saren Frisky says that sharing stories can facilitate healing of trauma, as well as make us feel less alone and anxious, strengthening us, making us more resilient. These were observed when disenfranchised and marginalized youth would come together to share their stories. Gee whiz, kinda sounds familiar again, huh? Okay, that was a lot of nerd stuff, so let's take a little break and digest all that in the context of the game. So all these real-life studies and research on storytelling may, at first glance, sound fairly removed from the game, but the more you listen to it, the more you can probably connect the dots of how this relates to Metaphor ReFantazio. Also, because I pointed out that it's familiar. I don't know if you've ever noticed, but there's a pattern when we're introduced to new friends in Metaphor. When we get some downtime with a new companion, one of the things we do with them is share the contents of the book. Usually because they're curious about what the thing we carry around all the time is. We've already mentioned the typical reaction to it earlier. It truly is fantasy. It's hard to believe something like that can happen. Or something like that. But at the same time, it draws us just a little closer because we can share in the sentiment of, if only it were true. Behind the cynicism lies the idea that deep down, this is the world we want for each other. It ties us together, lets us know that we share a vision, like in the various studies we referenced earlier. It gives us a shared identity, helps us cooperate more. And like in the last study we referenced, with storytelling, this group of disenfranchised youth and their bat dad can share their trauma, commiserate, feel less alone, less anxious, and more resilient and ready for the challenges ahead. What's that? What about the part where stories connect ideas across generations? Oh, easy. It's pretty literal too. This is a person that you can only contact through the power of the book. Give it some thought. Yep, it's more. If we put this in context with narratives as a passing down, the symbolism is pretty damn on the nose. We could only connect with our mentor/guide/author of the book through the book itself, because he's, well, kinda dead. Also, as the magical spiritual half of the king, the book was symbolic of passing down his ideals to the next generation in order to accomplish what he could not. He envisioned this ideal world so different from the bleak, cruel world of his own, but he was ultimately crushed by the weight of it. However, his spirit, very much literally, lived on in his book to guide the next generation to see beyond what's here and see what could be. The power to offer a different perspective on reality, to highlight what could be better, and to bring new possibilities to the table is probably the aspect of fiction that Metaphor ReFantazio emphasizes the most. We're no strangers to this in our world. Our own fiction has been shown to inspire advances in science, for example. We know science fiction has inspired many to enter the sciences. However, a study by Philip Jordan at the University of Hawaii attempted to quantify how much sci-fi influences research by searching for sci-fi related terms and papers. Not only have they found sci-fi influences in research dating all the way back to 1982, but they also found that sci-fi references are increasing as time goes on. More and more, theoretical designs for new technologies and moral discussions about technology are being influenced by works of fiction. Let's provide a concrete example. Twin stars are fairly common in the universe, but due to how turbulent gravity is around two massive stars, it's hard to find planets that revolve around them. But Star Wars' Tatooine and its twin suns inspired this huge movement that focused on looking for its real-life equivalent. And they have found one. Kepler 16b is the name of the planet. Even NASA's official site describes it as our first Tatooine-like planet. It's a gaseous planet, so it's not exactly the solid, livable Tatooine, but this proves that planets can form around binary star systems, and that maybe our very own Tatooine is out there somewhere. Don't even get me started on social movements that have been influenced or even started by a story. Throughout various cultures around the world, fiction has had a hand in bringing certain issues to light and even inspiring action. Lightning round, let's go! 1984 is probably one of the most referenced stories when it comes to authoritarianism, surveillance, and free speech. Things Fall Apart, a Nigerian story, was a pivotal work in decolonizing how people viewed African history and culture. Oliver Twist helped bring discourse around poor conditions of workhouses to the consciousness of the upper classes. Philippine revolutionaries rallied around Noli Me Tangere in their fight against Spanish colonialism. Kim Ji-young, born 1982, brought the discussion of sex-based discrimination to the foreground in South Korea. The movie Mahiru no Ankoku was part of discussions concerning police abuse in 1950s Japan. I can do this all day. We're talking about all these lofty ideas of how fiction is important to us. But when it comes to the importance of fiction, there's no need to look any further. Look at your own experiences. Think back to times when fiction has held you up, supported you, influenced you in some way. We see ideals in video games and want to emulate them. We see our favorite characters go through challenges and we feel for them. We find relief, comfort, and solace when we see them overcome their struggles and think, maybe I can overcome mine. The fact that we're here at all discussing this is proof that we love these stories and that they mean something to us. For those who played Like a Dragon, have you ever seen this? Or this? It's all memes and fun, but whether we want to admit it or not, some part of us resonates with it, moves us in some way. Have you ever played Red Dead Redemption and thought about what it means to atone for your sins? Have you ever played God of War and thought about what it means to be a father? Have you ever played Persona 3 and thought about what it means to live a life worth living? I'll end this section with a quote from author Ralph Ellison. He penned the novel Invisible Man, which had a lot to say about 1950s American society. And in its intro, he said, "And while fiction is but a form of symbolic action, a mere game of as if, therein lies its true function, and its potential for effecting change. For at its most serious, it is a thrust toward a human ideal." Metaphor is a great story in and of itself, but looking at Metaphor this way, we see that its story can be seen as a love letter to all the stories and narratives that have touched us in some way, whether it be myth, legend, TV series, or anime. Stories have been, and always will be, an important part of defining humanity's past, informing its present, and shaping its future. Metaphor ReFantazio deserves Narrative of the Year because it's a kingly narrative where narrative is king. And in this New Year season, the season of yearning for change, with all my heart,
I hope that fantasy gives you strength.
Thank you for watching the video up to the end. We hope you enjoyed our little discussion on Metaphor ReFantazio and its view on fantasy and fiction. If you liked it, maybe check out our other analysis videos. We'll link them in the description. Like if you like, subscribe for more video game and video game related content. This has been Game 8, and we hope to see you next time.